The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week we'll discuss Driussi's legacy now that the saga is over. We'll discuss the players we may see green smoke for this week and how they fit into the team. And Jeremiah will recap his experience at Austin FC's first ever open practice session. My name is Landon Cottam, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley coming to you from a sleety and snowy Northwest Austin, which does not happen very often. Don't know if it's happening in your area yet, but we may get some of that, which is good because they canceled school like 3 days ago preemptively for Tuesday. So if we're going to do that anyhow, we might as well get some actual weather to go along with it.
Yeah. I like a nice, crisp, cold day, but a day that locks me in my house I'm not so fond of.
I feel like tomorrow is going to be one of those days when this treadmill that sits in this back office mostly put up is going to get used because I'm going to need to move around some and I'm not going to want to go outside to do it.
Can you put the corgis on the treadmill?
I may need to. We may take a little corgi walk on the treadmill. We had another milestone too. So we're now 6 years past the franchise announcement of Austin FC being the 27th franchise in MLS. And I feel like every year we talk about the things that happened that day. So I don't necessarily want to do that, but I feel like this offseason is like a transformational offseason and kind of moving in a way on from like that original announcement, because while the ownership group hasn't changed, a lot of the front office folks are gone. The coach and sporting director that Austin hired and the next year after that are both gone. I think what are we down to, like 4 of the original players that we have left? Roto has turned over almost the entire technical staff. And I just feel like this offseason is probably the biggest in terms of impact since the very first one. Do you feel that same way too?
Absolutely, yeah. Lots of changes, like you just mentioned. I think another thing, on top of just the crazy offseason we've seen with all the transfer rumors, the Driussi saga, which we'll get into here in a second, it feels like the last few years, MLS in general has moved into a higher position in kind of the international rumor mill, transfer market, whatever it is. But MLS is selling lots of players to Europe, lots of players to other leagues now. And MLS teams get linked with players a lot more often. And Austin FC specifically has now kind of moved into that conversation as well, because it felt like it was always Atlanta, Cincinnati, LAFC, Miami. Those were the names being brought up in these international context conversations. Now Austin FC is getting brought up a lot more, and I imagine a lot of people in Argentina specifically, if you asked them to name 5 MLS clubs, Austin FC would be one of them for sure.
Yeah, that's a crazy place to be in, and it's it seems like a lot of a product of this sporting director and his beliefs. And there's no doubt that this team is his team now at this point, right? This is all Roto's project. There's no leftover vestiges of the before times. There are very few contracts that were signed before he was here. Very few players left. So Austin's all in, and there's definitely a style that permeates through the club. And we'll even get into this when we talk a little bit about the new announcements among the technical staff, the front office, the technical side on the sporting side. But let's get into the big news of the week, which was, I believe, also the lead story last week. But there's an update. So Sebastian Driussi's time as Austin is officially over.
Yeah, so we discussed last week a list of scenarios that could come from this whole thing with Sebastian Driussi. And tell me if I'm wrong, but I think the outcome falls into what we called best case scenario, right?
Yeah, this is absolutely number one. Just reading the headline of the press release, Austin FC announced today the club has reached an agreement to transfer Sebastian Driussi to River Plate. In exchange, Austin receives a club record transfer fee for an outgoing player. Austin FC now has a roster slot available to acquire an additional designated player, and we'll talk about how Austin seems to have moved quickly on that. So I think the fact that Austin got a record fee, and we can talk about what that was rumored to be, and then also that it happened quickly, so there's still a fair chunk of offseason and almost all of training camp for Austin to make other moves and bring in other players, is the best possible outcome that Austin could get out of this situation.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's kind of funny that they said record fee when if you look at transfer market, I don't remember if we said this on the show, but Johan Romagna is our current, or what was before our outgoing transfer fee at 750K, which again, I feel like people forget about this. That was kind of a magic move from Roto there as well. But yeah, the reports were, it ended up being $10.5 million.
Right. The reports are that it's $10.5 million, then Austin gets, I think it's 8.5%. It's very random as a sell-on fee, and then given Driussi's age, given Driussi's commitment to returning to River, it seems very unlikely that part of it will be exercised. But I mean, it's good for Austin. It's free money if it happens, right?
Yeah, for sure. And this was, we talked about last week. I was a little bit nervous with Burrell playing hardball in this situation where this guy's only going to this one team. Yeah, there's the whole thing with Estudiantes coming in and making a bid, and maybe that did put some pressure on River to up their game and finally come in with the bid that Burrell was looking for. But it could have ended a lot worse than this. And the fact that we came out with just the best possible thing we could have asked for, and even significantly more money than what you and I discussed, we would have settled for. This is great. Looking at Driussi's time in Austin, like what is his legacy here now that he's gone? I guess start off, like, do you think it's an overall positive or negative? Like in the binary, what side does that fall on?
I think in the binary, it has to be a positive. It's a club's first All-Star, almost an MVP. A lot of this is driven by the 2022 season, but by far the leading scorer, and even his 2023 year, which was very much a down year, was still a strong year offensively. Sort of, he's our first big name player. He was a top 5 player in terms of salary in the league. I feel like he was the one that was getting, from whatever national media there really is from the league, he was the one that was getting national media attention. So I think in that way, it has to be a positive legacy overall. I think there's obviously, he had some challenges as far as like fitting into the offense, and without Diego Fagundes' magical 2022 season, he was never the same. But I feel good about his time as a player, and I especially feel good about his time as a player with the amount of money and the speed at which the exit came. It's like hard to be sad about that part of the departure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this whole thing definitely taints his legacy in Austin. But it could, like we said before, it could have been a lot worse than this. And so if he's sitting out games and the transfer hasn't happened and we're not able to replace him, I think that gets a lot worse. The way it ended up, this kind of thing happens a lot, and I think Austin fans will feel a little less hurt by it as time goes on. And it was already going to be a complicated legacy anyway, due to he had that one amazing season, but he had more disappointing seasons than he did great ones, and then some less than ideal behavior, both on the pitch as far as body language, and then off the pitch as far as retweeting and posting negative comments about himself during a game that he was suspended for throwing a punch on the field. There's just a lot to look back on the last couple of years and not feel great about what he did. But you have to appreciate some of the best moments, some of the best goals, the best displays of individual talent that I've ever seen are thanks to Sebastian Driussi, and maybe ones that I'll ever see. And so could he have been better with some better players around him, with a better game plan that was more suited to what he did? These are things that we'll never know, and we can just be grateful for what we did see because he was on the field. And so we're gonna let Little Texas say it better than I could, and hope that the AI overlords at Warner Brothers Records don't strike our podcast for playing unlicensed music.
Just keep this part short, right? We should be fine. I don't remember what the fair used amount of time is, but keep it there, and we should be okay.
Oh wait, we have to hit the... the chorus here.
And we have taken different roads. We can't go back again. There's no use giving in. And there's no way to know what might have been.
So a lot of either younger folks or folks not from Texas or country music listening parts of the country may not know Little Texas. But Jeremiah, you said that you had a core memory from college involving Little Texas.
So I hadn't thought about this in a long time, but when I was in school at UT, sort of in my mid-20s, we used to live in the other part of a duplex with a group of 4 or 5 women who were all waitresses at Texas Landing Cattle Company in South Austin. And one time, one of them broke up with her boyfriend for like the 4th time and played that song, which may have been on like a CD single or something, because it was just the one song over and over and over again on repeat for an hour at like 2 a.m. while drinking one of those like giant jugs of Gallo white wine that you buy for like $6 at a gas station. Just never forget that. And every time I hear that song, that memory comes to mind. And so for you to send that to Mike and Steph and I, thinking about Sebastian Driussi was just like the perfect wrap up to this era of him as a player in Austin.
So I added that onto my soundboard to play for you. I added something else to the soundboard as well that I meant to play a couple of weeks ago after the Moon Tower After Dark episode and forgot because of how much news there was to cover. And so I'm going to debut this one. And Jeremiah, you might know which one I'm going to play at this point, but this is a clip from the Moon Tower After Dark episode.
Okay, in that way, then I will marry Chewy's.
Yeah.
Zula Boom Boom sauce.
Yeah.
And this during that show, we talked about the thing that made me laugh the hardest. And I think finding this clip while editing it and just listening to it over and over might be now the second hardest I've ever laughed was finding
Zula Boom Boom sauce.
Yeah.
I love it. I feel like it's time for a break, Landon. What do you think?
You don't want to defend yourself?
Nope. It's all good. I had a thought. Obviously, I lost it. I feel like that many times during that night when I went back and listened to it after the fact, that I knew what I was trying to say in my head, and I was not able through my words to convey the meaning of like what was inside me.
I think the funniest part is that you say Zulum Chaboom Boom sauce, and then Mike follows up with, yep, like he knows exactly what you're talking about. So another thing, since I bring this up in this part of the show, because now that Driussi's gone, all 3 voices on the very, very end of our show are now gone from the club. My original plan was kind of to keep that on the end of the show forever. But listeners, let me know what you think. Should we keep the thanks for nothing, see you never? I kind of want to. Should I add Zillum Chaboom Boom sauce to the end of the show? Should I replace the end of the show with Zillum Chaboom Boom sauce? Let us know what you think. I may end up doing whatever I want anyway, but if there's an overwhelming majority, then maybe we'll listen to your votes. Okay, now we can take a break. We'll come back with talking about Dubersarsky now being official. 2 moves that are not quite official, but may be very, very soon, and we'll talk about how those guys fit into the team. So hang tight. We'll be right back.
No one is around.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FEF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FEF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community transparency and client education. And they have their own podcast called Summary Judgment. You can check it out wherever you get your podcasts. And Landon, I previewed this last week. Did you get your official FEF Law calendar?
I did. And
this has typically been the Dogs of FEF Law calendar.
that's
and there's
right.
a change, which I feel like we should share.
Yeah, I'm holding up my calendar to Jeremiah, and he's looking in the face of a very cute little pig.
Yes, so it's the dogs and pig of FVF Law. There's a great story behind it, and I noticed that I believe that every month they had a different nonprofit that FVF supports, so I appreciated that about them too. So I think in a future show we could probably cover, we usually do like our favorite month with our favorite pets, and I think we'll probably have to exclude the pig from this because I feel like that's just not fair to everybody else. So we'll do that maybe on a future ad read, but like for now, good, yeah, that's cool. Good work, FVF Law.
You can go to FVF.law to find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's FVF.law. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that served the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. As a credit union, Amplify has no shareholders or parent companies. That means more of your money stays in the community.
Amplify has been the home of fee-free banking since 2022. Their free checking accounts come with 0 overdraft fees or minimum balances. That means Amplify's fee-free checking accounts can help you get more mileage from your everyday spending.
Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident. Learn to trust your bank again at Amplify Credit Union. To learn more and to register for free parking at the Amplify Esperanza branch on game day, go to www.goamplify.com/moontower-soccer. All right, we are back. We have one official signing, and then we have 2 that are not Green Smoke official. Well, actually, as time of recording, one of them is Green Smoke official. Literally 15 minutes before we hit record, Anthony Precourt put out the Green Smoke. So we'll talk about which player that is for, and then which player it's not for, but could be for in the next 24 to 48 hours. Let's start with the one that is official, which is Nicolas Dubersarsky. Tell us about this deal, Jeremiah.
So this was on Thursday. This is rumored, and we talked about him as a player a little bit last week. And then he actually comes up in the press conference this week. Both Nico Estevez and Ilias Sanchez talked about him. OSFC announced on Thursday the club has reached a transfer agreement to acquire 20-year-old midfielder Nicolas Dubersarsky from Atletico Central Cordoba of the Primera Division in Argentina. U22 signing, which is Austin's only U22 player at this point. Is that correct?
I believe so. I think Jean Kolmanich is no longer under that designation, so we technically could have up to 3, but he's the only one. And the way things are shaking out, we'll talk about roster spots that are available. He may end up being the only one.
That's right. So it's a 5-year guaranteed deal through 2029 with an option for 2030. So it's a long contract. Stand up with the club's reserve team in 2023. Made his senior debut in 2023, played in 23 of their 27 matches, 21 as a starter in 2024. So he's got a pretty good history with the club, occupies a spot where this is the kind of guy you want, right, for this spot. So we touched on this a little bit last week, but you've got a veteran presence at defensive midfielder. This is a great chance to take a flyer on what seems like a very promising young player that you can bring in and give him time to develop.
Yeah, and Nico Estevez said as much during the press conference that, and then I think maybe Ilie touched on it a bit as well, but just like to have these older guys that a guy like Dubersarsky can learn from, like that's going to be huge. And then depending on his progression and how fast that happens, he may push some of these guys out of a contract or push someone into Burrell saying like, okay, Dubersarsky is looking great. Maybe we don't need this guy, and pushes him into selling someone or trading someone, something like that. But another thing that shows how much Austin believes in this kid is the length of the contract. I don't think you said those years, did you?
Yes, through 2029 and with an option year for 2030. So that's a long time deal.
5+1. Like that's kind of unheard of. And so to give this kid that long of a contract, it means that they believe he's going to develop into something, and they want to own his rights whenever that happens, because they believe either he's going to be a really good player or they can sell him for a bunch of money in the not so distant future.
Yeah, the one thing that you talked about last week is we were hoping that we'd have a Doobie or a Duber or Dubes maybe as an option, and Nico called him Nico, which confused me at first because I'd almost forgotten it. I kind of forgot that this deal is done and like the other ones weren't for a moment, but yes. Like he's going by Nico, at least from the coach. We'll see if other players come up with something more creative.
He hasn't met him yet. I did see that there are Instituto accounts that refer to him as Duber. And so the first media availability we get with him, I am definitely going to ask.
You're going to ask
hey,
him?
do you have a nickname? If not, would you be cool with one of these two options?
And this is dumb, or a question. This is more about Argentinian clubs. So this is what, Instituto, and there's another club, it's Estudiantes. Like, is there academic affiliations with some of these teams? Like, it seems kind of interesting that at least two of them have like that sort of phrasing in their names.
Yeah, that's fairly common in South America. There's one of the biggest clubs in Chile is called La Universidad de Chile, and so I think the same with Tigres. The name is affiliated with a university in Monterrey. I think the origin, I don't know a lot about this, but I think the origin is like these were clubs that existed kind of organically linked or like affiliated with these institutions. And then as the sport kind of grew around them, they became professional teams. And I kind of think most of them or some of them don't actually have any affiliation with those original institutions that they came out of. Maybe some of them still do, but they kind of just have the name and are not actually affiliated with a university. Listeners, let me know if that is not true with some of these clubs, because I actually don't know.
It's very believable to me. Like, I bought into it. I didn't have any follow-up questions on that. So do you want to now move on to, like you said, we got green smoke. We have two options. We have a belief on which one of these two guys might be the green smoke tweet. So you want to start with who would be the replacement for Sebastian Driussi as our third designated player?
This one seems all but done. Like, Bogert is saying it's done. There's several places in Spain saying it's done. This is Mirto Uzuni, the Albanian forward that plays in the second division in Spain for Granada. The reports out of Spain, and these are very credible just because of, there's several credible journalists talking about it, but then also a member of Granada's front office was just on TV talking about it all. And so there's not as much of this backdoor intrigue stuff of like, oh, well, this information got out, but was that a leak from the agent, or is that what's really happening? And in this case, it was like, oh no, the guy from the front office was just talking about it on TV and was like, yeah, this is what's happening. And so that was kind of nice to have it straight from the horse's mouth in this instance. But reports are that it's a 12.3, somewhere in there, $1 million buyout clause, and that Austin has agreed to meet it. And it looked like for a bit, so we talked about Uzuni was sitting out of training, refusing to play because he wanted a new big contract for being their best player for the last 2 or 3 years. Austin came calling and said, we will give you that contract, buddy. But Granada's front office said, yeah, that's fair enough. We want to take care of our guy, but for the price that we think is fair, and for the price in this instance that was written into his contract. A buyout clause is there depending on what the number is and what the context is, it can be there to protect the club, it can be there to protect the player, and sometimes it's there to protect both of those people. And I think this one is a number where it's kind of there to protect both club and player. And the reports were, and what this guy from the front office said was, Austin made several bids, but none of them met the 12 million euro buyout clause, and essentially said, call us back whenever the number's 12 and we'll listen. Until then, we'll see you later, which is kind of funny in the context of Borrell's negotiations with River Plate for Driussi.
Yeah, we talked about these being kind of parallel situations last week, and more just on the side of players holding out to try to get their way. But now, in terms of negotiation, it becomes a parallel deal again. And I may have said at some point that Borrell's good at knowing what number he should receive or pay. So hopefully he's really good at evaluating talent, because this is a huge number. And this would be the third club record buyout in 7 months, and the second club record buyout in less than a month, with continually escalating payments for players. And we can talk about, last week we talked about how maybe this front off this would work together in attack. And then you have some thoughts about him as a player, and then we also got some more information from Nico before the training and a little bit at the training, I think that probably play into how this all works. But why don't you talk about what you've seen that makes it make sense first?
Yeah, so Uzuni has been playing striker mostly for Granada, and when I went back and was looking at film, most of the games over the last like 2 years or so were him playing as a striker, and so those are the ones that I watched. Kevin Morris dug a little bit deeper into his first year and a half or so at Granada, both their stint in La Liga and then his first season in the second division as well. And he did play quite a bit of left wing in those games. And so in this open training session on Sunday, Estevez rolled out 2 teams of all Austin FC players, both teams running a 4-4-2, and then said in the media availability that a 4-4-2, like a 2-striker system, is one of the shapes that they would be looking at. So yeah, I think this makes the Uzuni signing make a lot more sense. He did not say that we would only be running a 4-4-2. He did specifically said, we'll look to do several shapes. I've done 4-3-3. I've done 4-2-3-1. And I thought it was interesting. He only mentioned 4-back systems.
No, he talked about in the press conference. He talked about a 3-4-3 because he talked about having to play, he talked about having to play that in Dallas a little bit because of injuries and because that was what was available to him. But he started with the 3-4-3, more talking about how he was positionally flexible and wanted to set his formations around the skill set that is available to him as far as the players go.
Yeah. So all that said, I went back today and watched some of Uzuni's games when he was playing as a left winger. And he had a really good season the year he played as a left winger for Granada as well, and then plays left wing for Albania when he gets regularly called into the national team, mostly plays left wing for them. All that said, he very well could play on the left wing in a 4-3-3 or something like that. I don't know that it's going to change the way he plays all that much. It will affect where he starts, where his positioning is in build up and things like that. But regardless of if he's starting in next to Vasquez in a 2-striker system or on the left wing in a 3-man front line, he still wants to run in that inside channel. He still wants to get near goal and shoot the ball. And I think that's going to be true no matter where he is on the field. If you take another quote from Estevez in this media availability, he specifically mentioned wanting to get Osman Bukhari isolated 1v1 in space. That's going to be a thing they're going to look to do, I would guess, a lot. That's going to be kind of like plan A in most situations. If you think of Bukhari on the right side, taking a guy 1v1, and you have Brandon Vasquez crashing the near post, Mirto Uzuni, who scored 1 million goals in Spain, crashing that far post, that seems like a pretty good little setup there. So whether he's a striker, whether he's a winger, that's going to be what they're going to look to do no matter what. And so, yeah, I think there will be some interesting wrinkles, some interesting changes and rotations and mutations of what this all looks like, but that will always be true. Like Uzuni's going to end up in front of goal trying to get shots off.
Yeah, and another thing that he talked about in that one was when he was talking about Vasquez, and he said, you imagine people getting crosses into Vasquez, and I think it was maybe going back to people thinking about needing some kind of playmaker to do that. And he mentioned like, oh no, but Vasquez is really good at like running in behind too. You can see how these guys playing off each other with Bukhari being creative would lead to a very dangerous attack. And it better be, because this is a very expensive attack, and it's all 3 DPs that Austin has for some time now in the future, all being that front 3.
Yeah, and I think maybe right now we haven't seen enough. We haven't seen a couple of these guys who we think are going to be starters have not been around. We haven't seen them in the mix really. Once we get our eyes on it a bit more, we'll know a bit more about the specifics of what Estevez is trying to do with him. But one thing that I think would be useful until then, just a broader conceptual thinking of what this is going to look like, is to think about your attacking shape as like a front 5 and a defensive 5. And in that front five, it's going to often be someone from the back four pushing up into one of those spaces, as we saw John Gallagher pushing up as a winger, or Biru and Desler floating into the midfield at times. And there's all kinds of different ways you can do that. But in any case, I would guess Guilherme Biru will be pushing forward and oftentimes joining that front five. Uzuni will always be up near the goal. And so there's a lot of ways to get to different spots, to occupy different spaces. And as long as you have players rotating into the other spaces that aren't being occupied. So like Uzuni's probably never going to be the guy we're intentionally trying to isolate 1v1 to get, like, take a guy on and then him being the service guy. Like, that might happen and probably will happen, but that's not going to be the A1 priority. It's going to be to get Bukhari in those situations. And so it's all about setting up guys to succeed in those moments. And that's exactly how it works is going to be the things we'll learn over the next couple of months. But yeah, I'm not too worried about what specific position it's going to play. I'm more thinking about how are they going to get in front of goal? Who's going to be where in that moment?
Yeah, and I feel like I've done a very good job lately of not talking about everything in the context of being a Liverpool fan, but like wearing my Liverpool jacket tonight. And you talking about that. I mean, it's the same way Liverpool plays, right? There's five guys in the front, and ostensibly somebody's a 9, but it's very fluid, and there's underlying runs, and it changes based upon who's in the match, and there's fullbacks coming up, and it's a very exciting way to watch soccer. So I can't wait to see how Austin's able to deploy it. Probably not quite as good as the club currently leading the Premier League table, but still in a more fun way than we've seen out of Austin before. We have to retire the horseshoe sadness term at some point. That may be possible in the future.
Yeah. So as we said at the top of this segment, no official word about Uzuni, but all signs are pointing that this is going to be done very soon. We do have green smoke on the Anthony Precourt timeline at this very moment. And as is custom, a few minutes before that, we got a Tom Bogert tweet saying that the deal for Besard Sabovic is done, and that usually means Austin will be announcing it very soon. So that's who we expect to be announced tomorrow morning following this late night green smoke. This is a guy who there was some links to Austin FC, and then I think this all happened in between shows. So we ended up not really talking about this guy very much on the show. And so we'll do that today. But Bogert was linking him to Austin. There's some places out of Sweden linking this guy to Austin. And then Bogert said on SoccerWise, like, this one seems unlikely now, so I don't think this one's going to happen. And I was sad when Bogert said that we probably weren't going to sign him again, and then very excited now that it looks like it's actually happening. I really like this guy.
Right, so this guy, he's 27-year-old, a central midfielder. He is out of contract because I think we talked about, maybe we didn't even talk about this on the show last week, but he had done the departure Instagram post, thanks for everything, which really didn't mean that a signing was imminent because it just made him available. Seems like there was a lot of interest among Major League Soccer clubs, not just Austin, but it seems like Austin's finally got this deal done. And this just, for a guy that's talented, seems like a good piece of business. And a lot of it comes down to the fact that there's no transfer fee, which makes the salary math work a lot easier than it might have otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a guy who will be, I would guess, getting close to that max senior budget charge of $743,000. It may not get that high, but once you factor in a transfer fee with a salary that's in that range, then you get into the danger of, okay, does this push into DP territory? Does it take up a bunch of our TAM? When you can sign a guy on a free transfer and don't have to factor in a transfer fee to any of that, it just makes it a much more club-friendly situation. And so, yeah, we'll see what he's on, but this is a pretty high-profile talent as far as MLS goes. Reports as recent as August, I think, that West Brom in the English Championship and kind of a yo-yo club into the Premier League were looking at him. And then reports were that he had lots of options in Europe. And we'll be interested to see what he says about it, but looks like he chose Austin.
So let's can you go into like what he is as a player, and then now all of a sudden we went from 2 or 3 weeks ago, probably 3 weeks ago, being like the midfield is the weakest position on this club, and what are we all going to do? To this is maybe the deepest position on the club, and even beyond this guy, like the way that Nico Esteves talked about Irvin Torres, makes me also think there's other potential talent here available.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to cover before we get into his playing styles, I was looking at his Wikipedia page. I do this a lot, just like, what's this guy's background? What languages does he speak? Where has he played? And then sometimes there's a little personal life segment, and I'll read that, just to learn more about the player, but then also, given some of Austin FC signings, to look like, is there any weird controversial stuff here? So anyway, I was reading that section, no controversy related to him, but a weird little fact that his grandfather is essentially an Albanian war hero, or I guess his great grandfather. And so he's born in, I hope I'm getting this right, born in Macedonia, but both of his parents are ethnically Albanian from, I think, maybe Montenegro and Serbia. And then he grew up most of his life in Sweden, but has those warrior roots apparently. And then also, I think it'd be nice to have the Albanian background with Uzuni coming in. Likely at least some like cultural things in common, being from that part of the world. Okay, type of player though. As you mentioned, 27 years old. He's 6'1", looks really big out on the field. He's a central midfielder, and this next statement will let you know why I like him so much, but I have him listed here as the Desler of midfielders. And you all know how much I love Mikel Desler. He's a guy, and in the midfield, he's super well-rounded, doesn't make mistakes, always in the right spot. Also like Desler in that he's probably not going to get a ton of goals, not going to get a ton of assists, but can still be very useful in what happens before the goal, before the assist, in transition, in build up, in keeping the ball, in moving the ball. He's just really good at kind of all of it.
So what do we think this leads to? We talked about flexibility in terms of tactics, which seems like this is the kind of player that can do both these things. Seems like that is probably the future for Austin FC, but what insight do you have on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think he could play as a 6 or an 8 in the games that I watched for him. I wouldn't say where he played at before, but he's currently ending a contract at Djurgårdens in Sweden. Seemed to be kind of a late bloomer in that he played in Sweden, didn't really get a bunch of run, had one good season in Sweden, made a move to Turkey that was super short, went to Russia. The war started. He ended up leaving, came back to Sweden, and that's really when he started to hit his stride. And that's when he started getting attention from all over Europe. If you look at the transfer market valuation estimation, again, always grains of salt, but there's a huge spike in his transfer value once he comes back to Sweden, and really seems to kind of found his place and found his game in that year. But in the games I saw for Djurgårdens, he was playing in a double pivot and was the more conservative player in those two deeper midfielders. And so he's defensively capable enough to be a lone 6 in like a 4-3-3, but is offensively capable to probably be one of those dual 8s in a 4-3-3 as well, with maybe Ilya playing behind him. So I'm not entirely sure where he's going to fall, but one thing this does signal to me is that there was a big question of, okay, Driussi's out. Are we going to bring in a real number 10? And I think this is a definitive no. That's not happening. The 10 is dead in Austin, Texas. And that it seems like Rodolfo Borrell is going to move Austin FC into a more modern game, which is, in a lot of the world, the 10 is dead. Like, the 10 doesn't exist anymore. And MLS is one of the leagues where it really does still exist. But it looks like that's not really in the plans. Or maybe they sign someone with that profile, with that one last senior roster spot, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But Yeah, it seems like Austin's just planning not to play with a true 10, like a true traditional creative midfielder.
Yeah, it's going to be very different. I know somebody talked about, maybe in Scott Specht, the fact that for Austin FC fans who have only followed this one team in this one league, the availability of positional flexibility is like something that's going to blow people's minds because it's not something we've seen before. So I think we should go into that. So let's assume these moves happen. Then as far as what we have left for roster spots, 1 senior slot, 0 international slots available, 5 supplemental spots. As you mentioned, like we didn't really add a traditional playmaker like as a 10. But the roster's pretty filled out, but it feels like in a very good way.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we do still have 5 supplemental roster spots. I think we went most of last year with 4 or 5 available. And so if you have enough senior guys who you think can contribute and can fight for minutes, then the supplemental spots don't matter as much. It felt like they could have or maybe should have mattered more last year, but we're in a much different spot now. So yeah, the 1 senior roster spot and then now 0 international roster spots after Sabovic and Uzuni come in. That's going to be an interesting thing to watch is what do they use that spot on? And if nothing changes, maybe someone's in line to get a green card here soon. Maybe there's some outgoing transfers that open up a spot. But as of right now, that last senior roster spot will have to be used on either a domestic player or at least a foreign player with a green card. That's likely means they're already playing in MLS.
So for me, what I would, if I had a choice on where to deploy that, and this goes back to when we were talking about if we had extra spots a week or 2 ago, I would find, I don't know if this person's available, but I would find like a Major League Soccer veteran fullback who is like, can be just a guy who plays some minutes and you don't like, maybe it's not an amazing player, but you don't have to worry about, because it does still seem like at fullback, if injuries happen, this is the spot where the team is the thinnest. And so I would still like to have a solid dude who has to be domestic to fill that slot. I don't even know if that's a possibility.
I think that's a good shout. I think you could still make a case, depending on how much money you have left. Like if there's a fair amount of GAM or budget space floating around and you think you could make a move for a quality attacking piece, maybe another winger to fight for minutes or at least provide backup. Because you've got the, I guess like wingers only. You've got Bukhari and Obrion, and then it looks like Uzuni is going to be in that category at least part of the time. Then you've got John Gallagher. John Gallagher is also depth as a fullback. So
I was just going to say,
yeah, let's go for a fullback or let's go for a winger. And John Gallagher, you're a full-time fullback now.
Yeah, relief for John Gallagher at whatever position where there's availability is probably the best choice, right? Because he can play either way, and he's got strengths and limitations in either spot. But yeah, I guess you can go for kind of whatever the best player available is in either of those slots. And you need a little bit less from John Gallagher. So I thought I don't think there's any doubt that this roster's much better than it was going into 2024 and even ending 2024. And I don't think you can overstate the effect of the signings from last year, especially ones during the summer, having the offseason to play with more of the guys and to acclimate to the league since they both came from outside the league to be an advantage. Can you put a number, or do you want to like a quantity on how much better Austin is now than they were?
Well, I don't know. Like we'll see when the rubber meets the road, right? And they start playing games. But one thing we said a lot over this offseason is that we would like a lot of the guys who started a lot of games for Austin to not be starters anymore, and for those guys to become the depth. I think some of the guys that may happen to, especially if we run a 2-forward system, it ends up being a 4-4-2. My starting 11 in a 4-4-2 would not contain Danny Pereira or Owen Wolf. That's how much better this midfield's gotten in the last week.
I think that is a very good summary of where Austin is right now, and one that should be exciting for everybody. And it's not everybody has like FIFA brain. Like there's going to be enough cup competitions, enough rotation, enough injury to whoever. Even Ilie's not, well, he plays a lot of minutes, but he's not necessarily going to play like every match. Like there's enough minutes to go around. We're going to see meaningful activity from these guys, but I think that just shows a better Austin FC.
Yeah, and also if this is a thing that Esteves has said multiple times in the last couple of press conferences, that the competition is good. And so let's say Dubersarsky and Sabovic don't settle in very quickly and then they need more time, or somebody gets injured. Having guys like Danny Pereira and Owen Wolf have to fight for their minutes, and vice versa for these new guys coming in to say, like, these guys played a lot of games last year and we really like them. You need to show that we invested well and that you're better than them. Both sides of that are going to make those players better and fight harder and work harder in training and give more of themselves during a game, because not many of the guys who were regular starters for Austin FC were ever in this year or in years past really at risk of losing a starting spot because of a bad performance. That's going to change now.
And there's nothing but good that comes out of that. So before we take the second break and get into like the third segment of the show with things that in past years and past weeks might have been like first segment stuff because they were the biggest thing that were going on, I thought this interesting article that came out from Ben Wright at Give Me Sport, longtime soccer writer, who gave the 10 best moves of the MLS offseason so far, and 3 of the top 6 were Austin FC moves, which I think is a great summary of this offseason. So number 6 is offloading Sebastian Driussi. I think it's number 4 was bringing Brandon Vasquez back. And then number 3 is Uzuni. So like they're assuming that it's going to happen. But I think that shows, like, out of the whole league, the fact that Austin has 3 of the top 6 moves, either in or out, shares a lot about the kind of moves that this club is making.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Sunday's open practice session. Maybe some of the other things we learned with the media availability at that practice session with Nico Esteves and Ilie Sanchez, and then some new technical staff updates, and then quite a few other things as well. So hang tight. We'll be right back.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty. The Sage Wilson team is made up of Austin experts who are client-focused and have over 30 years of combined real estate experience.
If you or someone you know are in need of Sage Real Estate advice in Austin, talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty. Be sure to check them out online at sagewilson.com.
Our premier sponsor is McGuire Woods Consulting, helping clients in the public affairs space, from lobbying at the local, statewide, and federal levels to digital and communications campaigns across the country.
McGuire Woods Consulting has offices in 10 MLS cities, but only supports this podcast because we're getting ready to win third Copa Tejas?
Yeah. I mean, and that's like a stepping stone. At this point, we don't care about that trophy anymore, right? Because like we're going big. First Supporters Shield, third Copa Tejas.
Contact our friends at McGuire Woods Consulting at mwcllc.com for more information. All right, we are back. We are in our third segment, but there's still enough on the show notes here that in some weeks would fill an entire show. So we're going to try to get through these as quickly as possible without skipping anything. But let's talk a bit more about the open training session on Sunday. I was out of town and wasn't able to go, but Jeremiah, you were there for the media availability, and I'm guessing you stayed and watched the training session as well?
Yeah, I stayed for most of the training too. And I'll start with the open training because we see these questions about whether it's happened before and where it came from. So just so everybody knows, this was open practice training held at Q2 Stadium. So it's the first time that that's ever happened in club history. Nico Esteves in the press conference before open training brought up that it was something the club had suggested to him, and he was all in on. So he had at least some amount of influence on it, if not being the driving factor behind it. So it was, I heard there were 1,500-ish or so people who RSVP'd to the open training, which if you think about the number of people interested showing up at a practice when it's very cold is kind of insane. But it's great, and it kind of shows his enthusiasm for Austin. And I think probably most of those people showed up because the line was long and flowed for a long time, and people were in the seats below the Lexus Club section, so they were confined to a certain part of the stadium. But like, it was a great crowd. Lamurga played to sort of get it kicked off. It's a great showing. I think it was really a really cool way for the club to engage with the fans. And both Ilie and Nico talked in the pre-training press conference about how great it was to have this much excitement and have people out there. So it was just a really cool day all the way around. It was pretty cold, which wasn't great, but other than that, it was incredible.
Yeah, all the folks that I either read messages from or talked to, it seems like it was an overwhelming success as far as we talk about the charm offensive that Austin FC has been on for the last several months. Like, this seems like another check in the win column for that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And just and then after the training, several of the players, so it was Ilie, Desler, Nico, stuck around and answered they were pre-submitted, but questions from fans. It kind of had some more fan interaction. It was really cool. It was great to see like everybody cheer when the players came out, and there was a giant stew when Brad came out. Danny Pereira was there, did not train, but he signed autographs for some people who were sitting up front because he was just back from playing in the Venezuela friendly against the United States. So it was definitely contributed to the positive energy that the club had. And then this is the part where this is a reminder that I think we got a blue sky from Kevin Morris to everybody. So every year we make assumptions about things based upon preseason games, which are worthless. And at this point forward, we're going to make assumptions about what Austin's going to do this year based upon one open preseason practice. So let's go into that. Let's go into that part of it from what you've seen and read. Like, what were the big highlights of? Let's talk about the highlights of the pressers and then the highlights of the training themselves, because they kind of connect with each other.
Yeah, no, I think that's good advice from Kevin. That I did see a lot of people mostly talking about just how cool of an event it was and how that they're glad the club did it. But then quite a few of those same people or other people, Austin looked amazing. We're going to be great this year. I'm like, okay, let's pump the brakes given the fact that there's Austin FC 2 trialists and second and third round draft picks on the field that they're playing against. So let's maybe not get too excited about Austin's prospects this year. Be excited. I'm not saying don't be excited at all, but just put it into context a little bit when you're extrapolating Austin's success this year based on what you saw that day.
Yeah, and it's Austin versus Austin, right? So as somebody who goes to college football practice in the spring every year in front of 40,000 people, and people get excited about like the Longhorn offense, you like can obviously also say maybe it's because the defense is really bad, right? Like, you're playing yourself. So somebody's success is somebody else's loss. I think that the thing that ties this together the most is in Nico's press conference. We've talked about the positional flexibility. He very specifically talked about CJ Fodre playing as a center forward, playing as a 9 and less as a winger, and talked about what he brings to the table as far as that goes, about his athletic ability, which I think we all saw from him as a highlight. The fact that he like does a really good job of like arriving late in the box. And like he likes to be in front of goal. And he was never the kind of winger that was going to beat anybody off the ball, really, right? So this seems like the best place for him to be. So we talked about playing at center forward, and then we saw that from him in the open practice.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Based on one of my criticisms of CJ in MLS Next Pro with the second team was that when he was in those one-on-one situations, he depended a lot on his athleticism to just like poke a ball past a guy and trust that he was going to be faster and could just run past him and pick up that ball on the other side. We saw in his limited MLS minutes that stuff just did not work there. But what did work in his MLS minutes were these moments where he's just using that athleticism to essentially like blunt force, like the battering ram kind of thing. And in that assist to Rigoni against Houston, like, that is a physical gift that he has. And I think he could fit in that Uzuni role that I described earlier, where they're not the exact same player, but having a guy, even if he does start wide left, running through that channel, and instead of getting on the ball, taking guys on 1v1, to find the moment where he can get one touch in the box and take a shot. Because if you look back at his Austin FC 2 goals, a lot of them were that. It would be Jimmy Farkerloon beating a guy, whipping in a ball, and CJ's crashing the backside and puts his head on it. Like, you can do that from a center forward position as well, probably better from that position. So I think that makes a ton of sense, playing him in that 2-striker system.
Yeah, another position that we've talked a little bit about where there's depth that get a lot of attention, both from Nico and from Ilie, was talking about the midfield and the various talents of people there. And then we also talked about the roster spots available. And Irvin Torres got called out from the coach both before training for his skills and I think after too, in the post-match discussion. And I just wanted to give you a chance to share your love for Irvin Torres again, or maybe even at this point talk about why everybody else is too excited about Irvin Torres, and what we might see from him, if anything.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's too excited about Irvin Torres. I think he's great. But yeah, just given the profile of the guys that we're signing for the first team now, the fact that it seems like we're moving away from using a 10, or at least like deciding that we're not going to pretend we have a 10, because we kind of never did.
Never really did. That's fair.
But Irvin fits really well into that kind of thing where, like, I think Irvin's strongest position is going to be in a double pivot with someone who like complements his abilities playing next to him, and vice versa. And so, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. It would be very, very cool if Irvin keeps progressing, gets that first team homegrown contract. And then they wouldn't even have to, we'll get into some more roster rules in a coming show, but there's more flexibility around homegrowns as of last week that would make it easier for Austin to get Irvin Torres first team minutes without giving him a full on first team supplemental roster contract.
Yeah, and both Irvin and Micah, I think, from the coach and from people who watch people being Chris Wellhausen, going full Wellhausen on like Irvin and Micah's potential to contribute. But what that made me think about from those guys is it's interesting a little bit because you've got a new coach who has not seen everybody and has no preconceived notions. And this kind of goes back to Driussi being out when Nico was asked about Driussi being gone. And he's like, in my Austin FC experience, Sebastian Driussi has not been a part of it. And I can only talk about the guys that are with his team. But, you wonder if guys like Irvin and Micah are maybe extra hungry and working extra hard because they have the chance to sort of reset their narrative around who they are as players.
Yeah, and Micah Burton, from what I was told, tell me if this is right, but I was told that he also played as one of the 2 strikers.
Correct.
On the team that he was on.
Right, and again, started being like one of the 4 that they had, but yeah.
Yeah, again, like there were moments with the youth national teams and with Austin FC 2 where Micah was playing alone as a striker, as like a false 9. I don't really like him in that role, but I could see him being quite good alongside a more traditional striker and them kind of playing off of each other, because Micah can play up on that front line, but I don't think he has the natural inclination or the physique to be like a traditional number 9. But if he's kind of that buzzy guy playing around a more traditional 9, I could see that working well for him too. So that'll be interesting to watch too, because we've talked about how we think Irvin Torres has surpassed Micah, even though he's a year or 2 younger as a prospect. It'll be interesting to see if in this new system, in maybe a different position or in a different context, if Micah can kind of take a step up in his progression as well.
Yeah, and we were far away, but one thing I would say about Micah too, it seems like from this training, is that he seems to have physically matured some. Like he doesn't look as much like a kid playing among adults like as he has in the past. And then Nico was asked about sort of defensive strategy and style, and so I think you wrote these notes, so like if you want to go into those, I think it's an interesting perspective from him too.
Yeah, this is both based on comments from Nico at the open training session, and then from something that Brendan Hines-Ike said in the media availability last week. But he was asking about defense, and one of the quotes I thought was interesting was Nico said, and this was in Spanish, this is translated by me. Tell me if I did a bad job, native Spanish speakers. We said to defend well is also to attack well, and to attack well is to defend well. And then paraphrasing what he said next is if we're organized and position ourselves well when we have the ball, when we lose the ball, we'll be in a good position to recover it and try to score. And then if we just defend well, we'll have opportunities to transition and create counterattacks. So the two are tied together. And when asked, Brendan Hines-Ike was asked what they were focusing on or what was going to be different, he brought that exact thing up, is transition defense, what we do, like our shape when we have the ball so that we don't get beat in transition as often. And that's the thing that we had been told Nico Estevez kind of revolutionized in Dallas and really fixed in that team. Now we've heard it from multiple places that he's going to try to fix it in this team. That's really encouraging to me. Jeremiah, have you ever heard of the concept of a PowerPoint party, or Pechakucha is one of the like formats of that?
I know what Pechakucha is, but I saw this. I don't know who sent that. I saw that article and did not even read it. But so go for it. I don't know what article you're talking about. But okay,
I went to a PowerPoint party recently with some friends, and the prompt was like, do whatever you want. It can be something you know a lot about, something about your job, or just a weird random topic that you want to talk about for 6 minutes. And surprising nobody, I chose a very specific soccer concept to do a PowerPoint presentation on, and it was rest defense shapes in transition defense. Because of all the stuff with Nico Estevez, I've been like kind of studying up on this and did this presentation on rest defense shapes. I would like to maybe recreate this and put it out somewhere. I don't know what the best way to do that is, because it almost certainly needs visuals along with it. So Jeremiah, if you have an idea, or listeners, if you have an idea of what format would be best to essentially put out me doing a PowerPoint presentation, I think I want to do that. Maybe I'm the only one who cares about it, but I'm going to do it. So let me know where would best be to put that.
How many people do you need? I feel like if we have volunteers, we could do that.
To do what?
Oh, to display what that shape would look like. I was thinking back to when somebody asked to explain the offside rule, and we had Adrian Healy and you and me and Trevor Scott do it. Maybe we could recreate that.
Oh, we could do that too. I mainly was saying I just want to be able to show slides and like show some pictures while I'm talking about it.
Okay, gotcha.
Because I don't think doing it on this format of the podcast
would work. Gotcha.
Do much good.
Okay. The other, I was gonna say we did get to see Elie too, and we only had a few minutes with him, and we've talked about a lot of the things as far as about being in midfield. And I will also say, I would say one thing. Dude was in slides. And my feet were like freezing off in shoes and socks. It's a choice. It's because he was about to go into meetings and training, and I think he didn't want to like do an interview in his boots. So good for him. We didn't get to ask him a lot, and then also he spent a lot of time talking about the wildfires in Los Angeles because he's got family there and he just played there, and so he was very clearly a man that had more important things on his mind in soccer. He did talk about his role sort of as a leader, as contributing to like however he can. He was specifically asked maybe about whether he would be the captain or not, and he was like, I will do whatever people need of me. So like, he's a super thoughtful guy, nice guy. It made me feel even better about signing him this offseason, but we didn't get a ton of insight from him other than the fact that he was also wearing a sick piece of Austin FC gear that I had not seen before, which was a hoodie, which I am immediately going to have to go to the Verde store and buy. So the club moves of like putting players in things that people want to purchase continues.
Yeah, smart tactic. I do agree that we didn't get a ton of just sheer content out of Elie. He did come across as extremely charming, and
absolutely,
like he's be really good in front of a microphone.
Yeah, I don't want to dismiss any of that for sure. It was just like the situation didn't allow for a lot of it, but I feel really good about having him here. Yeah,
and Estevez said this today that he's like having a coach on the field. That's something that Cherundolo had said about him at LAFC. So it'll be interesting to see, again, 34 years old, And then also just with all the depth, like, is he going to be on the field enough to be the full-time captain? I think that might be one of the only things that keeps him from wearing the captain's armband, is just some of these other guys are pushing him off the field.
Well, with the training and with the practice and the other practice this week, the annual number change and swap, which I feel like a lot of the sickos who are probably listening still now care about a lot. So one, people traditionally care about numbers because a lot of times numbers in soccer, especially like in traditional, like if you look at the Premier League, mean a lot in terms of position, in terms of expectation for the player. So just for those of you that are like, why are these guys talking about player numbers and why does it all matter? I just want to set the context for that. So we had a few, and I'm going to start with Ilie getting the 6, because that was one of the very first questions that was asked of him, because Danny Pereira was the number 6 last year and has been in the past. And so I think it was Moises asked if that was a negotiation or if that was something that just happened. And Ilie said that Danny wanted the change, and Danny had come to the club asking for the 8 because the 8 had freed up. And if you understand positional numbering on the field, that makes a ton of sense. And so with Danny wanting to do that, then that made sense really to take the 6.
Yeah, and I think some people are reading into Danny wanting to change to the 8 that he's going to be playing in a slightly different part of the field this year. And I think that's a fair thing to read from this. I don't know that it means what some people maybe think it means, in that Danny Pereira has been a lock-picking number 10 this whole time and Josh Wolf was holding him back. I don't think that's true either, but Esteves talked about that a little bit in the press conference as well, that, or I don't remember if it was him or maybe Ilie said something. Either way, I think what really is going to happen is kind of what we said would maybe unlock Danny, is like having the right pieces next to him so that he has the freedom to do the things he's good at without the responsibility to do things that he's maybe not as good at. And playing in a double pivot or having a more defensive minded or a more conservative player next to him or behind him will unlock him. And then also another part of that is the guy behind him. Can that guy progress the ball to get the ball to Danny? Because another thing we saw in some games last year was when Danny was pushed farther forward, sometimes Ring or Valencia, whoever was playing deeper, couldn't get the ball past midfield. And so it's like, okay, well, yeah, maybe Danny's better further forward, but it doesn't matter if you can't get the ball to that part of the field or can't get the ball to his feet. So I think having some of these new guys there will allow Danny to do more of the things he's good at and not be so preoccupied with things that he's not great at. So I think that is something we can read from both the number change and then also context clues surrounding that.
Yeah, and I think the next one, one's fairly obvious, I think, but Svatak gets number 5, which is very much a traditional starting center back number to have. So I think no surprises there.
Yeah, I think all the most badass center backs have a single digit number.
Right. He was number 21, which leaves Rubio to take 21 from number 14. I went back and looked. For most of his career in Major League Soccer, both in Colorado and in Kansas City, he was number 11. I mean, do you have any take on why he may have done that?
I have no idea. I'm using my high school sports logic, where like on JV or whatever, we were often wearing the varsity jerseys from 3 years ago. And, I wanted to wear this number, but the guy who wore that number on the varsity was 3 sizes larger than me. Or, that one had to get cut off because that guy dislocated his shoulder, so that number doesn't exist in the away jersey, so you can't wear it anymore. And often, one of the logics that got used was, okay, take a power of 10 above that. So going from 11, making it 21 so that the 1 is still the same. That's all I got. Maybe there's a better explanation than that.
Well, and that maybe because like what Brad Stuver was originally number 41, right? Because one's traditionally the goalkeeper. Going back to, I think it was just middle school football. When I played high school football, number 75 was really just like the biggest kid, because 75 was always the largest jersey every team had. My son was number 75, in middle school because I think it was probably the same thing. It's like we have one double XL. Jackson Bentley's the biggest kid around. He's going to be 75 whether he wants to be or not. And then we had the Obrian and Bukhari swap. So 7 and 11, flipped it around.
Those are both traditional winger numbers. I can't remember which is which normally, but I think Bukhari has worn 11 in the past. Obrian, we didn't talk about Obrian as far as like the context of this 4-4-2, but at Dallas, he played a lot of games as a second striker. And so I think that suits him as well. Like if I don't know that will be like the first choice for him there, but good to know that there is depth in that spot. Or if we build our systems around having Uzuni kind of playing a flex winger forward, that Obrian can do some of that similar stuff as well.
Yeah, and that's a good thing for Rubio can do that too, right? Look, Rubio could be one of your like more advanced midfielders or be one of your strikers. So
right,
like, positional flexibility is really important. And then today we got an announcement that Austin FC added 5 additional members of the club technical staff. So Nico Bosch is assistant coach, is the 5th member of the Nico Estevez coaching staff. And is that like a magic number? Is 5 how many you can have, or is that just what Austin has?
I think you can have as many as you want.
Okay.
I imagine there's kind of some norms and I don't know, like collective wisdom that like, yeah, this is kind of what you need or what you want. I honestly don't know, but I imagine you'd be allowed to hire as many as you wanted to.
Yeah, and this is another guy, 15 years in Spain. I was telling you before, Luke Bentley and I have started taking golf lessons, and apparently Nico Bosch uses the same golf coach that Luke and I do. Hopefully he's better than Luke and I because we're working on actually being able to hit the ball every time, which feels like a very basic part of golf, but it's a very complicated part of golf somehow. Second one is like we got the official announcement of Austin FC's new high performance director, Miguel Villagrasa, who has 25 years of experience, worked first team in Spain. Probably the most important part of this is he was the head of performance for FC Dallas from 2022 to 2024. Third, Eric Roqueta from Puebla, again, Spanish background. Leslie McManus it's the club's new performance dietitian. Don't remember that being a job before, but good for this person who has.
Yeah, I wonder do you think that means like there's going to be, you hear, I think this is mostly like in the 90s and 2000s in the Premier League, but these like new modern coaches coming in and telling the players that they can't eat ketchup in the dining room or anything. Like, I wonder if
this does feel like one of those.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I feel like in the Premier League, it's probably like, no, you can't smoke cigarettes on the bench. Is more
that's what it
like
was
telling
like
them.
In the 90s when Arsene Wenger first got hired.
Yeah, and then Aaron Ross, club's new performance scientist from the Mets and Yankees, as well as University of Michigan Performance Research Lab. So, they're good. They're good additions. I don't know a lot of them. Like we talked about, this is one of those where you probably would have dug into the entire like career history and resume each of these 5 people in past seasons. And this year it's like, cool, we've got it. There's like more important things to talk about.
Yeah, and I guess like the obvious and maybe most interesting thing here is that at least the like technical staff that's going to be working with the players based like on soccer stuff, they're all Spanish. And is it surprising, or do you think people will be surprised that that's the case?
I think
because it seems to be a thing that people that like Spanish coaches specifically do that. Like if you look at any Spanish coach at any team anywhere in the world, if you look at their staff, there's a good chance most or all of them are Spanish. You could look at it as kind of like a good old boys nepotism kind of thing, which I'm sure in lots of cases there is that. But also, if you look at most of the best soccer teams and the best coaches and the kind of the coaches that everyone copies in the last 10 to 20 years of the world game, most of those guys are Spanish, and they're kind of not the only leaders in soccer coaching, but some of the leaders, and a lot of the stuff that people are trying to emulate comes out of Spain. And so it to me, it's not surprising that a guy who's coming, I guess two guys in Estevez and Burrell coming out of Spanish soccer want to bring in more Spanish people to help them run that team.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to, probably, obviously, the two highest profile leagues in the world, and like La Liga, it's very internal, right? Like, I mean, almost all your staff is Spanish and Spanish speaking, and in England in the Premier League, they're bringing in players. I mean, not just players, but like staff and experts and stuff from all around the world, including from Spain. So, I mean, it's not surprising that that like somebody who has that background in Spain would want to have people that they relate with, and almost all these, most of these coaches have like some outside experience somewhere else, right? Like started in Spain, but have also coached in other places. So, I mean, I think it makes a ton of sense, and I think it again goes back to what we talked about off the top, where this is definitely Rodolfo Burrell's team in way more ways than just the head coach and the players on the field. But it's like the entire sporting operation is made in his vision, and this is his vision, and it's exciting. And hope, and like, I believe it to all work, but I mean, there's still a lot of responsibility he's taken on in the early press conferences. Like, it seemed like a little bit off-putting that he was so self-assured, but like, he does seem like he knows what he's doing. So like, maybe it's great.
What else should we cover this week, and what else should we push to next week, Jeremiah?
Let's just cover two quick bits from Austin FC associated folks. So you got a little bit on Gavin Wolf.
Oh yeah. All it is that when I went to media availability at the St. David's Performance Center last week, there was quite a few second team guys training with the first team, and then quite a few other guys who were there. I don't think the second team officially reported yet, but it seemed like there were a lot of them in the building and training, and there were a handful of them training over on the little side pitch, and one of them was Gavin Wolf. So he's not gone yet, and I would imagine, like, looking at the MLS coaching carousel, I think the last vacant spot has been filled now, and Gio Savarese still doesn't have a job, and so you would think that he was reportedly a finalist for 3 or 4 different MLS jobs that were filled in the last couple of months and didn't get any of them. And so all that to say, like, Josh Wolf is maybe not first in line to get the first vacancy in the league. And so, yeah, it wouldn't be surprising if Gavin Wolf sticks around for, at the very least, the next 6 months, maybe longer than that, which is good news for the second team in the academy.
Yeah, it is. And from what I've heard from people like very personally close to Josh Wolf, is he's very happy this year to take a year off from like what has been a grind for decades, and just maybe like collect a check, play some golf, actually watch his kids play soccer, and like not worry about the grind of Major League Soccer, and then get back into it in 2026. So
yeah, and that seems like a very kind of common and acceptable thing to do for a coach in a lot of sports, right? So I don't think it's going to hurt his chances of getting a job, like whatever chances he has of getting a job. I think sitting out a year probably doesn't hurt those chances, really. Maybe even helps them.
Yeah, and the other thing, like, you had a note around the Las Vegas Lights and some USL folks, and I think who is it? Valentin Noel either was like an incoming. No, he was just their biggest sale, right? Wasn't it Val Noel, like, out of Las Vegas?
No, Joe Hafferty.
Oh, Joe Hafferty, that's right. Wrong.
Yeah.
Former Austin FC player.
Anyway, I thought the Nate Jones thing was interesting just because we were just talking about, like, Burrell keeps doing things that make him look competent. The Nate Jones thing is one of those things. He was Austin's first pick, the number 5 overall pick in the 2024 Super Draft. Austin immediately traded him for, was it 300K, 350K in GAM, something like that. And yeah, he was on loan, or like playing in the MLS Next Pro, is now a full-time registered USL player. So I guess he's on loan still, but the fact that they're loaning him out means he's not playing now. So maybe he'll turn into a good player, and it'll look stupid that Austin traded him. But for now, Austin probably needed that allocation money more than they needed a 6th string center back.
Yeah, I'm sure he's done good with it. So I think we could just close it out and maybe before you go to the traditional close, in the close, we could talk about the things that we didn't talk about this week that we want to talk about next week and leading up to the season, which is only 4 weeks, a month away as we record this show.
Yeah, that sounds good. So yeah, we'll be rate, review, and subscribe. All the stuff I say at the end of the show, you probably have it memorized by now. But we'll be back next week, and we're gonna talk about some of the stuff we didn't get to. So those include some Austin FC 2 ins and outs, quite a bit of movement there. We'll talk about MLS roster rules. We're gonna how they're different from in the past, what we think about them, if they're good for the league, and what it means for Austin FC. And then we'll talk about the jersey leak. We still haven't really had time to dig into that, which is usually pretty juicy. And what am I missing? What else am I missing here?
Yeah, I think we'll just we'll talk about those and like anything else that might happen during the week, including hopefully like mostly just some official announcements on things that we talked about on this show.
Right. All right. Well, thanks so much for listening. We'll cover all that next week. Until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll get you next time.
When no one is around.
Think for nothings, you never.
La gente.
Oh my God.
Zula Chupa Boom Sauce.
Yeah.